BA096.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
Now I'm recording. I can tell you, Taylor, how much I admire how much you get done, because you have so many hobbies, so many side hustles. You work like a demanding career. You have 2 children. You
Farz
go
was
back
just
and
genuinely
forth.
complimenting me, and I was like, "Try to record." I would hear genuine
I know, and now it sounds insincere because I'm literally just. But it's actually really impressive. You do so many different things.
Thank you.
So we are back for part 2 of this week's split episode situation.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to start from the top. So this is Doomed to Fail. I'm Farz. This is Taylor. Last Monday was Taylor's section on a historical story, and now this is my section on a true crime story. And so we're going to test this format out for a few weeks, see how it plays out for us and see how it plays out for y'all. And if it works, and we're going to keep doing this way, otherwise we can just revert back to the way we've been doing things. So that's what I got.
Correct. I love it. I opened up my other beer.
You're still drinking the same Pacific. You're drinking New Pacifico.
Yeah, I only had 2 Pacificos, so now I have 0 Pacificos. But I just still have a Diet Coke that I haven't drank any of. Yeah, so when I talked about my story, in case you missed it, we were drinking motor oil because we were talking about Detroit and the Fords. And Farz, you were drinking your kombucha.
I'm done with the kombucha.
All right.
I'm drinking water now.
All right, good for you.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm gonna go grill some meat after this. So I'm gonna save my beer drinking.
That's fair. It's just so hot. We were at the Park MGM in Las Vegas this weekend, which we love. We love the hotel. There's no smoking inside. It's like great for kids to like walk around and not feel like you're gonna die.
Wait, the MGM doesn't have smoking?
No, the Park MGM across the street from the MGM.
Oh, okay.
It used to be the Monte Carlo, but we were in the pool, and the pool was like lukewarm at best. It was not refreshing. It was like nice to be in the water, and we like had pina coladas, and like so it was like cool, but it was like, man, you can't keep a pool from being super hot these days.
No, I was actually thinking about like doing like a regular thing where I just go get like a bunch of ice, like as a one-off, and just fill the pool with it, because it is not refreshing right now. But yeah. I don't know. It feels like when it's this hot and you're gross anyways, you're like, whatever, I'll just jump in the water.
Yeah. Totally.
So you're drinking the Pacifico, I'm having some water, and we're on to the true crime section of our story. So I started this out. So I literally picked this story out earlier today. Like it was like a really flight moment of like just trying to figure out what I'm going to talk about. And I picked it because I love the movie, the Chucky franchise. Okay. And I just learned that there's a Chucky series that is now 2 seasons in, which is really cool. I didn't actually know about that. I watched the trailer. I've not seen it itself, but it looked really, really cool. But it started to make me think about other terrifying little things. And it made me go down a rabbit hole of researching the human equivalent of a Chucky doll, which is a killer kid.
Ooh.
And Chucky is actually going to make an appearance in this story in real life.
Oh, no.
So
I love it. The
story I'm going to be discussing today is about the murder of James Bulger. Do you know that name?
No. But I might after you talk a little about it, but tell me more. I'm not going to Google it yet. Should I Google it? I'm not going to.
No, yeah. So some people know this name, and probably the reason why you know this name is not the person I'm talking about. You probably know the name James Bulger because James Whitey Bulger was a famous Irish mobster who was murdered in prison and ran the south side of Boston for like 70 years. That's not who we're talking about. That just happened. Yeah, that was like maybe like 6-7 years ago.
And he was like on the lam for a long time?
Yeah, he was on the lam. The movie Black Mass by Johnny Depp is about him. If you watch, if you've seen The Departed, Jack Nicholson's character is basically Whitey Bulger. Like, this guy is like really, really famous. That's why when I say James Bulger, the natural instinct is you're talking about Whitey. No, I'm not talking about Whitey. This is a different James Bulger.
Got it.
So
unrelated.
Totally unrelated.
Okay.
So this James was actually a 2-year-old boy from England who suffered an incredibly horrific fate at the hands of 2 basically 10-year-old Chucky dolls.
Oh, no.
This all happened in early 1993. So our story will start with the 2 main antagonists, 10-year-olds Robert Thompson and Jon Venables. These two were friends and classmates and had a habit of playing hooky from class together. And on the day of the murder, the two of them went to the local mall to just basically be hooligans and steal shit and be annoying bastards, basically.
Yeah.
For some reason, they had decided that what they wanted to do while at the mall was abduct a kid and push him into oncoming traffic. That's what they told police later on after everything that is about to happen happens. And honestly, I would rarely ever say this, but like doing that would have been like a blessing compared to what they actually ended up doing.
Wow.
That's how bad it was.
Oh my God.
The day they're at the mall, a woman named Denise Bulger and her 2-year-old son James are at a butcher store that's in the mall. And Denise literally lets go of James's hand to pay the butcher. She looks down and he's gone. That's how fast. That's how fast it happened. It's absolutely insane.
I do yell at the kids all the time at the store if I can't see them. And I'm like, I know I sound like a crazy fucking person, but if I can't see you, you're kidnapped. Like, I have to be able to see you, you know?
Dude,
and even
crazy.
that, like, I should be touching them. I should latch them to me.
So when I was living in Florida, I went to there's a mall there called the Sawgrass Mills, and there was like this little girl, like this small little 2-3-year-old girl, just standing in the middle of like this walkway, just crying, and nobody was helping her. Nobody was doing anything. And I walked up to her and was like, "What are you doing here?" He's like, "Mommy, mommy, mommy." And I was like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And then, luckily, there were like women there who like are moms, and we're like, "Okay, we gotta like figure out what to do." I was like, "Cool, this is not my thing anymore. Y'all run with this thing." But like, I would imagine it's something similar. You just look down and your kid's gone. Like, it's got to be the scariest thing in the world.
Well, what you tell your kids, I mean, of all the parenting lessons, you tell your kids, well, one, that a grown up never needs your help. So like, don't help a grown up. But also, if you are lost, you look for a mom with kids, and she can help you. You know, like look for another mom who has a bunch of kids, and she will help you find me.
Yeah. So if like I walk up smelling like bourbon, you know, that's the opposite of that. But I was very helpful in that situation.
Oh, that's very nice of you. Thank you. Because
luckily, like other people were there because I would not have known how to handle that situation, obviously.
Yeah.
So literally in the seconds that it took her to pay this butcher, John and Robert grabbed James by the hand and led him away. This was all captured on CCTV cameras. It's in full color. You can actually see them holding his hand and everything.
Yeah.
They take him down to the Leeds and Liverpool Canal, which if you look up pictures of it now, looks like a very quaint and lovely little green space, which is probably due to the fact that after this event, like some 57 million pounds, British pounds worth of revitalizations happened there.
Yeah.
But when they were there, it was like the opposite of charming. Think like more Albert Fish than pastures in England type of vibes.
I'm picturing the like the, what are they called? It like the not the wetlands, wherever they went in it. Even though I know it's in Maine, but you know how in it they like went into the woods and it was like awful. Keep going.
It's definitely not like that, but it's actually just as terrifying. So they make their way to this canal, and that's kind of when all the torture basically starts. It started fairly mildly at first. It's awful no matter what, but it's still somewhat mild. They pick James up by his head, or they picked him up, they turned him upside down, and then dropped him on his head on the concrete. James is a 2-year-old boy. Like, the concept of someone being mean to you or someone hurting you is just like unfathomable. Like, I can't imagine what this little boy was thinking. He was crying hysterically because he just didn't know why people were being mean to him. Why was this happening? And because of this, they were seen by somewhere around 38 people seeing James crying. They would eventually walk away from the canal and walk 2.5 miles to another city. During that walk, 2 people stopped them saying, "What's going on? What are you doing with this kid?" And they just said, "Oh, he's our brother. He's fine. He's our brother." Which, like, you probably believe, right? Like, what?
Yeah.
Like, who would question that?
And like, oh God, it sucks that like the like, what is the mom doing right now? Like freaking out, obviously.
Yeah. So they get to a juncture in this city between a cemetery and a railway station, and they find a remote area on this railway station and just basically start trying to torture and kill James. They had, when they were at the mall, they'd shoplifted some paint, and so they started pouring paint in his eyes for some reason. It was blue paint. They were being very specific that it was blue paint, which will come up later on.
No.
They kicked him, they stomped on him, they threw bricks and stones at him, they shoved batteries in his mouth for some reason. They found a fish plate, which is a 22-pound piece of steel that connects two sections of railway together, and they would just like throw it on him while he was on the ground. And that injury alone resulted in 10 skull fractures. So it was bad. It was really, really bad. Okay, there's a part of this where there's some element of like sexual abuse, and it is not affirmed 100% whether it was true or not. There were some things that came out. They're like, this could have happened, this could not have happened. And frankly, I don't really love talking about that very much. And so because it's not a confirmed thing, I just rather not even discuss it because we don't know. So after all this, they laid James out on the track, who at this point had already stopped moving. And a train came, didn't see him, and split him in half.
Oh my God, poor baby.
So the one saving grace was that he was already dead when the train hit him. They know that for sure. And apparently they couldn't figure out what the cause of death was because he had so many injuries. They found 42 injuries on his body, of which they think most of those were in and of themselves capable of killing him, but they don't know what actually ended up killing him.
Oh my God, it's terrible.
Yeah. So by this point, James is a missing child, but nobody knows where he is. It was basically dumb luck that anyone found this kid because the boys had covered his body with sticks and debris. So when the train hit him, they were like, we just hit something, whatever. Like we don't know what we hit, just something. Apparently, Luna. That's Luna.
It's a dog.
It's a dog. Thank you, Taylor.
You're welcome.
Apparently, playing on railroad tracks is like a pastime in the 1990s in England because some kids were also playing on the railroad tracks 2 days after this happened, and they found his body and reported it. This was not a whodunit. It was obvious. The boys, you could clearly see them on video leading this kid away, right? So it wasn't like that big of a thing. The media ran with this story, and some woman knew John and immediately identified him and called the police. John was brought in, so was Robert. They were questioned. It was determined that they were obviously guilty. There's a ton of evidence here around forensic stuff that went on. Like their clothes were covered in his blood. They had blue paint all over them. It was just like 50 different things that made it completely unequivocal and unquestionable that they were the killers. We know that for a fact, basically. So they were put on trial, and by this point, they're 11 years old, and they are tried as adults. In England, at the time, the age at which a person could be held criminally liable for their actions is 10 years old. Most of the time, that doesn't mean they are subject to adult penalties. It just means that we think you're old enough to have understood the ramifications of your actions.
You're not right or wrong by then. Yeah.
Yeah. So I looked up, so guess what the youngest age is in the US?
16.
6.
6? All right.
Yeah. Do you know what state?
Utah.
North Carolina.
All right.
The oldest age for criminal responsibility in the U.S. is 12, and that is actually, wow, weird that you said Utah. The oldest age is 12, and that is California, Massachusetts, and Utah. So every other state kind of falls between 6 and 12 years old.
Got it.
At trial, they were found guilty and became the youngest convicted murderers in history.
Oh, God. It's horrifying.
Crazy. Like I mentioned, kids don't typically get punished like adults, so when the judge sentenced them, they sentenced them to serve at Her Majesty's pleasure, which is a term of art in UK, saying they stay in prison until a parole board decides they've been rehabilitated. But the judge did say that his recommendation is they stay in jail for a minimum of 8 years. The judge, I mean, this is going to make you kind of angry, actually, later on. We're going to get into the penalty phase more. The judge in this case did something that was also incredibly rare. He released their names to the public, which almost never happens with juvenile offenders. But he was like, the public needs to know, and he just made that determination and decided to do that. The media jumped all over this, and per usual, content was determined to be the main factor in all this. Again, circling back to Chucky, they found out that John's dad, right before this had happened, had rented Child's Play 3. And in that movie, there's a scene where some kids are playing paintball, and Chucky replaces the paintballs with actual bullets And the fact that there's a scene of someone getting shot with a blue paintball pellet, and the paint was rubbed into James's eye that was blue, think that maybe Chucky had something to do with this.
I mean, Chucky's no. Yes and no. Like that, you have to be a real shitty kid to make that correlation.
I mean, Taylor, between me and you, we've probably watched like in total like 2 years worth of slasher movies.
Yeah. Never killed anyone.
There's like the whole content is what makes people do things argument. It's just so not based in science.
You're a bad person. You're gonna do something bad anyway. Like, yeah, there's no way. But
so many kids I grew up watching Bambi and crying when the mom was killed, and they're hunters now. Like, it has no impact. It had the opposite impact, maybe.
That's too bad.
It's too bad. I hate that shit.
That's funny.
So the two were sent to basically like Kid Joe, which kind of sounded like a secure version of a camp. Their parents could visit them regularly, and they were able to basically continue their education and then undergo counseling and therapy. It's worth noting that they apparently exhibited like fairly severe PTSD. From what I was reading, it sounded a lot like Robert was the antagonist, and John kind of just went along with him. By most accounts, there didn't seem to be any remorse in Robert, whereas John did seem to have remorse. Like, it seemed like it actually bothered him a lot more than it bothered Robert, what they ended up doing to this kid, which good, it should. But it's gonna be an important detail here in a minute when I talk about where they're at now.
Yeah. What about like, I imagine if my kid had was in this juvenile prison for like, I don't know, stealing a car, I'd be like, I don't want him anywhere fucking near these guys.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
yeah.
I don't know. I feel like as other people, I don't know, this is bad.
And that was actually like a part of it, was the sense of isolation they also experienced, because the other kids that were in there, they weren't in there for freaking killing a 2-year-old.
Exactly.
They were in there for something stupid. They were like truant from school or like stole a car or something,
Yeah, exactly. It's a big difference.
So these kids were in prison, or their version, kid jail, whatever, juvie. And it's worth noting that during this time, there's a lot of political maneuvering that's happening around this case. So politicians in England are basically using this as this event as a "I'm tough on crime" stance by advocating for higher sentences, which ended up actually happening. So the original sentence was at Her Majesty's pleasure with a minimum of 8 years. That got pushed to 10, then that got pushed to 15. In the middle of all this, John and Robert's parents were also appealing to the EU's court, saying that they should not have been tried as adults, and they basically saying like the legality of changing a prison sentence after the fact is not right for a kid. And so the court agreed, and basically, long story short, was that it dropped back to 8 years. So a lot of procedural stuff that was going on there, but that was the long and short of it. Ultimately, they served like basically the minimum. They served like a little bit over 8 years. I think it was like 8 years and 6 months. They got released in June of 2001. So they're around like 18, 19 years old, give or take.
I don't love that.
Yeah. To say that they were the most hated people in England is kind of an understatement. They couldn't go back to being themselves once they were released. They were treated like a protected mob witness. They were given new identities. They were moved to a secret part of England with fabricated passports. They were legitimately in witness protection. And part of it was that they couldn't access certain things, which would be parole violations, because if they did so, people in neighborhoods would realize who they are and target them. And so they weren't allowed to go to certain cities. Their movement was restricted, and so on. The fear was that if people knew who they were, they would actually kill them. Like, this didn't stop the media. In one case, a media outlet figured out and published their location. Did not know their names, but they did know their location. They published that. They were found in contempt of court in order to pay £150,000 in penalty. And also, like, a large part of these penalties had to do with how expensive it was to keep this up for the government. In another situation, a foreign publication, so one that the government couldn't control through contempt of court proceedings, also said that they found out their new names and identities, and said they're going to publish that. And the government literally paid them to not publish it. So this was not like a fine or anything. This was like, please don't do this, because it's going to cost a shitload of money to get these guys back under witness protection again. For decades after their release, people in the UK would publish pictures or names of people they didn't like and say it was these two.
That's hilarious and terrible.
It's terrible. It reminded me of the Son of Sam when remember that when
Yeah, you'd be like, yeah, I think it's my creepy uncle, you know, or like I think it's a brother-in-law. He's kind of a jerk. He's here in Brooklyn. Yeah.
Henry's like, yeah, there's a guy named there's a bookie named Tommy Legbreakers. I think it was him who did it. He's like, yeah, you know, Tommy Legbreakers, he's my bookie too. So nice try.
Oh my God, that's hilarious.
I love that part. But again, this section could be like 10 minutes on its own. Suffice to say, a lot of people went to jail for like almost getting other people killed by saying that people they didn't like are these two guys. It happened a lot.
Mhm.
It happened into like the 2015-16s. Like it was happening constantly. In 2010, John got arrested again on charges of having and distributing child pornography. This obviously created issues given his release from prison and also with protecting his new identity, because now he's back in the system, he's back in court, and his identity can be revealed, his pictures can be taken, all that stuff. They really went over the top to protect this guy. And he actually wasn't actually that protective himself of his identity. He actually told two random people when he was in witness protection who he actually was. And the court went around their typical procedures when he got brought up on these child pornography charges, where it was just the judge who could see his face. Nobody else could see his face. Like the
Wow.
prosecution, like his lawyers, nothing. Kind of wild. At the time, something happened when he was in jail that resulted in him needing an entirely new identity. At the time, it was called a, quote, serious security breach, unquote. Later on, we learned that because he was caught on pedophilia charges, like his info kind of leaked out in there, because it's kind of like America where they have a version of the sex offender registry, basically.
Wait, who did that? Who had that?
Jon Venables.
Got it.
And there was a website that would publish the info of people who were caught doing pedophilic things, and John was part of that, and his info was published on the internet. So they had to change his identity again.
They have a sex offender. Wait, what? But if he shouldn't he be on the sex offender registry?
It's
Or
not
no,
that
because he was too young?
no, it's not that he's on the registry. It's the fact that they tied his fake identity to his actual identity. Because
Is his fake identity on the registry? Because I would want to know if someone near me was a pedo.
I don't know if so it ultimately didn't end up mattering in his case, and I'll explain why in a moment. But his the problem was, so let's say you changed it from Jon Venables to Bill Johnson. Okay, so Bill Johnson's a sex offender. The guy living as Bill Johnson is a sex offender.
Right.
The fact that he's also Jon Venables is what the government's trying to prevent, because if people find out that he's Jon Venables, they will kill him.
As long as they know that he's a sex offender.
Yeah. That part became obvious and clear to the entire world. In 2013, he was again paroled from prison on these child pornography charges, which I'm really starting to think the UK is like just super, super, super chill on punishment. Like he was an adult, like he was not a kid anymore. He was an adult when he did this. 8 years in total for torturing and murdering a 2-year-old.
Yeah.
And then it was a year and a half for this child pornography charge. But realistically, the reason that it took so long to get released had nothing to do with the underlying child pornography charges. The reason it took so long was because they had to create a new identity for him, because this information got published on this website. That was the issue that the government had with him.
Yeah.
Anyways, didn't matter. In 2017, he again got caught on child pornography charges, and he's in jail as of like this moment. As of right now, he's still in jail. And again, the issue is this identity, because the government started looking into Canada, Australia, New Zealand. They're like, where can we send this guy where we don't have to create a new identity for him every couple of years? And obviously those countries like, yeah, no, thanks for sending your best and brightest, but we're good. We're gonna hold off on having John enter our country. Jacinda Ardern, one of the great prime ministers and world leaders, she said something along the lines of, yeah, we're not going to give this guy special treatment. He's more than welcome to fill out the application for citizenship or transfer or whatever, the immigration. I would not waste my time if I was him, though. It's like, it's how she phrased it.
I feel like I've read, like, even like in the States, like stories of being like, okay, this real bad guy has got to get out of jail. Where do we put him? And people would be like, no, there was a guy here. I remember I saw a petition like next door or something, and they were trying to send like a sex offender, like give him a house here in like our area, and people signed a petition to be like, no.
Yeah, like it's there's
Yeah.
there's no option other than change identities, randomly insert them somewhere with like a backstory. Like there's no other way to do it.
Yeah.
So there was a thing I read when I was looking this case up that had to do with kind of like explaining kind of away the sex charges or the child pornography charges, because apparently he also dated really young. He had like a 17-year-old girlfriend, and he was a gross dude. But I read something about how there is this concept when like your childhood is taken away, you have what's referred to as delayed adolescence, and you just miss this chunk of childhood because of what you experienced. And there's some apologist thought process that like, maybe that's why he did what he did. Like, he's not the worst person in the world. Somebody else was also in this position, but I don't know, man. You killed a 2-year-old, you got caught with all this stuff. It's just like, I don't know. I can't make an excuse for that.
No, absolutely not. But like, I feel like that's an argument that people use that reminds me of like Michael Jackson, because like he didn't have a childhood, you know?
Was that one of his arguments?
Yeah, not his arguments, but like people's arguments about him. Like his childhood was taken away from him. He was in an outlet. His parents were, it was terrible, you know? But also that was terrible. That wasn't even his fault. It was terrible. He didn't kill anyone. I don't think.
Yeah.
It was terrible because his parents.
Yeah, I mean, this guy is probably going to be locked up for the foreseeable future because, and realistically, it's probably not even going to have anything to do with the sex offense charge. It's probably going to have to do with the fact that it costs so much money to create a new identity for him, and this guy keeps telling everyone who he is. It's just like, you stop talking about your identity, you fucking idiot. But meanwhile, Robert seems to be doing fine. So he later on came out as gay and has been in a very, very long-term, happy, healthy relationship with a man who does actually know his identity. Yeah, and in the prevailing years, he's proven to be much less of a piece of shit than John is, but maybe it has to do with the fact that he's a psychopath and probably has no emotions whatsoever anyways. I don't know.
But you think that one was the instigator?
Yeah, that's the prevailing theory, is that he was the instigator.
So there's some gay couple in the UK right now who are 40 years old, where one of them is this guy.
Yeah.
Look at your friends with suspicion, everyone.
Seriously. I mean, think about all the other crazy ones that we know of. Like Carla Homolka is like literally just like
I can't believe she gets to be
going to PTA meetings and like going to the park.
Unbelievable.
Like, it's wild.
Unbelievable. That's so sad.
Yeah.
Poor James. What a freaking cutie pie. I'm looking at him. His little English accent.
Yeah. And this is actually a fairly recent story because he was supposed to come up for parole in October of 2022, and that got pushed out 6 months. I don't know what the latest status is. It's presumed that he's still in jail, but because of the nature of security around his identity and his name, I don't know. We don't know for sure, because it could be a thing where the government releases him and it's like, I'm just not going to tell anyone what happened with this guy, and he just goes off into the sunset.
Right,
you know?
But then he'd fuck up again. He's a fuck up.
Yeah. I mean, he was caught with some really terrible stuff. Like, he was not like he was caught with like how to create it yourself, and
yeah.
Bad stuff.
Yeah. And it's crazy that I guess I remember this. I mean, they're my age. They're like exactly my age.
No,
like we would have been in school together.
Wait, are they?
Yeah.
You were 83. You were
82.
82. Okay.
82. Yeah. Which is crazy.
It's wild. Not good. And it's wild because it's like again, like, because they're so young, it just makes you think like all these people stopped him and saw what was going on, but it's like, who on earth would ever think anything other than this is these guys? Like, who?
You wouldn't. Yeah.
What 10-year-old would kidnap a 2-year-old? Like, it's crazy. So it feels like a unfortunate tragedy that was probably very, very hard to not happen.
Yeah. I wonder how many people get stolen in a mall. I don't know. I'm trying to see if there's like mall kidnappings. I guess I think it doesn't happen less now because we don't care about malls as much.
I think that's probably a part of it, but also I think, like, you know, if you're an adult, you know you're gonna get caught if you do something in a mall because there's cameras everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, hasn't kidnappings in general gone down? What's the ratio? I'm gonna look this up. Have kidnappings gone down in the USA? On average, fewer than 350 people under the age of 21 have been abducted by strangers in the U.S. per year since 2010.
Is that less than before, but is it like in like a weird way because of like the way that you think, like, are there less serial killers because of forensics?
Could be.
I don't know.
Wait, in 2020, 400,000 were abducted in the U.S. That can't be right.
I'm just gonna go hug my children and hold their hands. I'm like, I need to see you
Oh,
constantly.
no, this is also kids who run away and do stupid shit like that.
Sure.
Yeah, I can't find stats on whether it's gone down or not, but I would assume it has. I mean, it's still a lot. Look, if 350, it says 350 a year are actually abducted by strangers. That
Wow.
feels like that's like almost one a day, which is like a crazy high number in my opinion.
Yeah, that's still so many. Oh my God. That's real scary. It's real scary. I'm scared now. I don't love it.
Yeah, it's not a good story. It's not fun, but
don't love it.
But that is our tale for this week.
Cool. Well, thanks for having. Let us know what you think about this being two parts, friends and fam. That this was our second half.
Also, let us know which one you're going to see first, Barbie or Oppenheimer. I'm going with Oppenheimer.
Yeah, no, you see Oppenheimer, then you have a few drinks, and you see Barbie, and then you can sleep at night.
That's how you're doing it? You're going to do a twofer?
I don't know. We're gonna be on vacation, so like people can technically watch our children for us, and we could do it.
Wow. Okay, that's actually not a bad idea.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Chris Nolan movies don't I mean, they're good to think about, but like this one feels like it's gonna like make you feel weird.
Oppenheimer, brunch, Barbie, sleep at night. Okay. I think that's the only way to do it if you're gonna do it in order.
July 20th, people, mark your calendars. 18 days to go.
We're very excited. Yeah, I mean, I'm going to New York that weekend, and I'll be there the 22nd. So I think that might be the day.
What's going on in New York?
We're going upstate-ish to like go to a house and see family. Because we're gonna be I know it's exhausting. We're gonna be real close to Hyde Park, so I'm gonna go to Hyde Park, and so I'm very excited. I'm gonna go to wherever Lorena Hickok is buried and do all of those Eleanor Roosevelt pilgrimages.
That sounds fun. That sounds lovely. Yeah. Next time you're here, I gotta take you to this bar that's called so it's Roosevelt Room, and it's on the block called Eleanor Roosevelt. So I've been there like 4 or 5 times. It's actually a really good bar. So we'll go check it out.
That's fun.
Sweet Taylor, everybody please do like, subscribe, write us emails at doomedtofailpod@gmail.com and tell us what you think.
I have one more listener mail.
Let's hear it.
Lindsay, my cousin, is super smart and has a PhD in Japanese literature and spends a lot of time in Japan. And her husband, Brad, went to Odafuku in Asakusa, Tokyo, which is a place that has a perpetual broth. So the broth that they've been making or like simmering since like 1950.
Which I have a picture of because you sent me a picture of it. And did you notice that they also like it's like a martini. They put olives in like a stick in the perpetual broth.